Welcome back to the third place. On this channel, we are not just reading the encounters, all right? I don't just read the encounters, I want to find the spiritual and the realistic thread. I want to ground these stories in reality because I believe that these stories are real. I believe that these are real beings. So, what I do is I find the best encounters. So, I go on TikTok or just listen to people that are talking about their encounters, and I always get an intuitive thread. If you don't know me, if you're new to my channel, my name is Rosie and I'm a water-coded mystic as well as an embodied Axis Mundi, among other things. And I just absolutely adore all things cryptid, all things aquatic, all things woo-woo, okay? So aquatic mermaids are my jam right now, okay? Like I said, I'm water-coded and I listen to stories, and there's a whole lot of bull crap on the internet. But some stories I listen to and I'm like, yeah, there's something to this. There's something to this. And these are the stories that I pull in and I find the thread, I find the pattern, I ground it into reality, all right? Because that way we can take it out of fairy tale land. So in today's video, I spoke about this yesterday, and this video was on the channel by Ashley Inc. Go follow her if you're interested in all kinds of stories. She is freaking awesome, okay? And this is the story that I spoke about in the last video that I did, and it's about a guy whose dad told him in the later stages of his life, as usual happens, that he had an experience in the 80s on a private chartered boat where he and the crew were apparently hunting mermaids. Let's get into it.
This guy is saying that his dad was part of a mermaid hunt in the 1980s, and even though he said, admittedly, I'm not sure if my dad was telling me the truth, I don't know why he would lie about this. Like, he was a pretty straight shooter, pretty straightforward man. And if you're new here, Spooky Scary Storytime is a series where I share listeners' allegedly true stories about the creepiest or most unbelievable things that's ever happened to someone that they've never shared. And I know other stories like this exist, right? Like, I know that other people have told stories or shared stories on this app and others about mermaid hunts. Maybe there's some truth to this, maybe not. I don't know. You make the decision. I'm just here to tell the stories. So this guy's name is Kevin. Kevin said that he was born in the 1980s. Before he was born, his dad was in the Navy, and his dad worked as an underwater welder, which apparently is a very dangerous job. Shortly after Kevin was born, his dad was discharged from the Navy with a medical discharge, something to do with neurological issues. He also said his dad had this constant ringing in his ears that was always bothering him and always giving him migraines for years and years, pretty much up until his passing. Also worthy of noting, Kevin said that growing up, his dad was deathly afraid of water, of bathtubs, of pools, of lakes, like would not swim. Apparently, after he was discharged from the Navy, he still had old contacts with like friends that he had made in the Navy. And so he was working these like contract jobs. Boats were usually involved. They paid well. And he remembers his parents arguing about it. Like, his mom did not like that he took these jobs, but his dad just was always like, okay, well, I have to get it done. Kevin was 16. He was apparently thinking a lot about what he was going to do in the future. Like, he was like, do I go to college? Should I join the service? And part of him wanted to join the service, join the Navy, like his dad. Grandpa had also been in the Navy, so it was like a family thing. There had been a lot of talk around the house about what he was going to do after high school. And his dad was insistent that he did not go into the service, but his mom was like, oh, if he wants to, he should. And his dad would slam his hand down and be like, he's not going into the service. One night in the summer, they're sitting outside. It's Kevin and his dad on the back porch, and Kevin was listening to music. He said he doesn't remember exactly what he was listening to, but it was something with like layered harmonies. His dad was sitting there drinking something, and he just put his drink down and he said, can you please turn that off? He said he didn't sound mad. He was just like tired. Kevin turned it off. They're just sitting there in silence, and then his dad is like, I should have told you this a long time ago, but I want to warn you about something in case one day I'm not around to tell you before you have to make the decision about what you're going to do with your future. And Kevin said that was just how he started this story. And he said that one day after he was discharged from the Navy, one of his buddies called him up and was like, hey, I have this contract job, pretty short term, it's a cash payment, there's an NDA for safety reasons. And his dad was told that basically he was just going to be part of rigging and underwater support. His dad apparently assumed that it was going to be some kind of illegal fishing vessel because apparently he had worked on one or two of these before. Maybe something with environmental enforcement, but he didn't ask too many questions because that's how these jobs worked. And he knew the buddy who called him and asked him to work on the job, like they had worked together before. So he says, yeah, I'll take the job. I need the money. And his friend's like, cool, we need to leave the dock at dusk. His dad tells him that basically that alone should have made him uneasy. And he knew that certain fishing vessels went out at dusk. It was the boat that should have unsettled him because the boat didn't look like normal fishing vessels. Nets were apparently very fine and threaded with metal filaments. The winches were military grade. Hold on. To look up what that meant, but it's basically the mechanical device that like pulls up anchors or pulls up tension lines. The floodlights on the boat were designed to shine straight into the water instead of across the surface like on normal boats. Kevin's dad gets there. He notices very quickly that the crew is very stern, like nobody's cracking jokes, nobody's talking to each other, and he didn't recognize anybody except for his buddy. He notices as they're getting onto the boat that one guy makes the sign of the cross. Another thing he thought was strange was one guy was like eating a can of tuna, and he asks another guy if he wants some, and that guy says, I don't need anything from the sea. Before they take off, somebody hands out headphones, and they're like medical grade, like noise canceling, super tight against the skull, and Kevin's dad asks why, and somebody just says protocol. Once they were far enough out, the sonar picked up some shapes that were moving coordinated, like around the boat. He said they knew they weren't whales or sharks in the way that they were moving and like the patterns that they were swimming. Kevin's dad was just like waiting for instruction, but he noticed that the crew was calling them contacts, not animals. He heard people rushing around talking about vocal events and containment failures. He said that that's when his dad realized that this was not a fishing operation. The nets were deployed vertically, which meant they were trying to catch something swimming upward. He said they baited the water with something organic that came in these big glass jars. It wasn't fish. He thought maybe mammals of some kind, like land mammals, but he said he really didn't want to know. And that's when somebody taps him and tells him to put his headphones on, and they say basically don't take them off no matter what you think you hear. Kevin's dad goes to put on his headphones, but as he's like placing them over his ears, he can hear like a woman talking, and he's looking around the boat like, is there a woman on here? And he said it was like different women's voices. Like it sounded like one woman was begging for her son. One sounded like his own son calling for his dad. So he like looks, he's like, is there a kid on this boat? And the voices got clear, and he realized they weren't coming from the boat. They were coming from somewhere out in the water. And then he heard his own name. Then he tells Kevin that basically as soon as he snaps the headphones on his ears, he could still hear some sounds, but it was like at least muffled. Something hit the net, and it was hard enough to rock the boat, and a couple of the guys on the boat dropped to their knees and started vomiting. One of the other crew members started taking his headphones off, and two of the other guys jumped on top of him and started restraining him. And he tells Kevin that they hauled something onto the boat, and when he first saw it, his brain like just totally rejected it because it looked like a human. It's like a woman soaking wet, but the proportions were weird. Mouth open wider than a human's could. There were too many teeth, and the eyes were glossed over like fish eyes. He said he was just dumbfounded staring at it, and he noticed like light wasn't reflecting on the eyes. It was reflecting off them. Like it wasn't focused on anything. It was like an animal's eyes. His buddy, the one that got him the job, walks over to him and motions for him to take off the headphones. He basically tells him that they're not as powerful when they're out of water. Kevin's dad is just like, what is that? And he said, look, this isn't what it looks like. This isn't hunting for sport. This is thinning them. Like this is population control. Kevin's dad is like, well, what is it? And his friend's like, you know what it is. And Kevin's dad is just like, these aren't real. These don't exist. And he says, yeah, well, everybody knows that if you tell people that they exist, they're going to go looking for them. That's when Kevin's dad said that this thing looked at him and asked about Kevin. And he said, is he at home? Is he sleeping? Asked him if Kevin still wakes up crying at night. And that's when his friend, he said he did it with something that looked like a cattle prodder that he told him later ruptured its insides with vibration. Once it was done, they headed back to shore and everybody was silent, but Kevin's dad could not get his mind around what he just saw. So he's asking his friend, he's like, well, why just one? And he said, that's all we can handle. That's all we can do in one night. And Kevin's dad was like, but why? And his friend basically tells him that they disrupt underwater cables, they interfere with submarine sonar. A lot of sailors had gone missing near certain vocal hotspots, but that the reports kept getting buried. Also tells him that it's dangerous because they know how to imitate people. Apparently he was paid handsomely and he went home, but he never returned back out to sea. And that was apparently the point that he started hating bathtubs, hating water. Apparently he never listened to music again. He developed chronic tinnitus, the ringing in your ears. He would wake up thrashing from nightmares, fighting something invisible. And that was the end of the story. And so Kevin's like, well, what was it? His dad apparently just told him, son, I already told you what it was. He said, I need you to listen to me and not go near the water. Kevin said his dad passed in 2018, and he's thought about this story a lot. He wishes he had asked more questions, and part of him isn't sure if his dad just told him this story so he wouldn't go into the Navy. He says his gut is telling him the truth, because if he didn't want me to go in the Navy, he would have just told me he didn't want me to go into the Navy. He was not the type to make up tall tales. He said he has found audio clips online of what sound like distorted voices in the water, which some people say are whale calls, but other people swear that you can hear voices and singing underneath them. His name was changed, but he'll be seeing the comments. Let him know if you have thoughts. I love stories like this. I love the weird ones. So if you have a story like this, please feel free to send it in. We would love to hear it.
I actually made a video on TikTok about this. I actually did a video on TikTok, and I think I might, rather than just like rehashing everything that I said there now, I will just put that video here. All right, I'll put that video here because then it hit me. She's got legs. She has legs. Not a tail. She has legs. Before we go any further for TikTok, this video, the following is my personal opinion, intuitive framework, and speculative theory of alternative realities and folklore. So it's for entertainment and spiritual purposes only. Okay, let's go. Guys, this story I heard on Ashley Ink's page months ago, all right? And every single time I listen to this story, every once in a while, I sit there and I'm listening to it. And there's something about it that made me go, something is bugging me, something is bothering me about this story, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is. What is it? It's not that I thought it was a lie. It's not that I thought it was bullcrap. It's not that I thought that the person was just making up ish. It's not that I thought it was a daydream. In fact, I thought it was very, very verifiable. So much so I need to put my glasses on. Then it hit me, and I was in the bath, no less. Every time I get in the water, stuff starts to pop off. Kevin's dad felt a certain type of way. Let's read it.
But it tells Kevin that they hauled something onto the boat, and when he first saw it, his brain just totally rejected it because it looked like a human. It's like a woman soaking wet, but the proportions were weird. Mouth open wider than a human's could. There were too many teeth, and the eyes were glossed over like fish eyes. That he was just dumbfounded, staring at it, and he noticed light wasn't reflecting on the eyes; it was reflecting off them. His buddy, the one that got him the job, walks over to him and motions for him to take off the headphones. He basically tells him that they're not as powerful when they're out of water. Kevin's dad is just like, what is that? And he said, look, this isn't what it looks like. This isn't hunting for sport. This is thinning them. This is population control. Kevin's dad is like, well, what is it? And his friend's like, you know what it is. And Kevin's dad is just like, these aren't real. These don't exist. And he says, yeah, well, everybody knows that if you tell people that they exist, they're going to go looking for them. When Kevin's dad said that this thing looked at him and asked about Kevin. And he said, is he at home? Is he sleeping? Asked him if Kevin still wakes up crying at night. And that's when his friend said he did it with something that looked like a kettle prodder that he told him later ruptured its insides with vibration. That they disrupt underwater cables, they interfere with submarine sonar. A lot of sailors had gone missing near certain vocal hotspots, but that the reports kept getting buried. It also tells him that it's dangerous because they know how to imitate people.
And it hit me. What was so wrong about this story? If Kevin's dad knew that it was a mermaid, right, even if he didn't believe in mermaids, the minute it came on board the boat, he would have been like, these don't exist. And even if he said, what is it? It would be an incredulous way of like, oh my God, what is it? But he knows what it is, essentially. But what he actually said was, it came on board, it hit the deck, and he was looking at a soaking wet woman, but the proportions were wrong. There were too many teeth in the mouth. The eyes looked glazed over. At not one point did they mention that there was a tail. And do you know why? Because I didn't believe there was one. She had legs. She had legs. And that is exactly why he was so dumbfounded. And think about it. Think about it. Seeing a mermaid would be amazing in itself, but if she had legs and he's out here thinking, we just hauled this thing on board that is able to mimic, he's hearing all of these anomalies, it comes on board, it looks like a woman, but it just looks a bit off. Would you be saying that? I wouldn't. I would be saying, oh my God, there's a fish lady on this deck. Guys, I'm willing to bet money, moolah, on the fact that this female had legs. And that's what caused him to not be able to say it, why he was so shocked. And if we look at it like that, that really flips the game. I'm surprised that I had this, just came to me when I was in the bath. She had legs. She had legs. This puts a very interesting spin on the original sirens, or what sirens are supposed to be, all right? And I've heard other stories from around the world about women with bird women, and other kind of anomalies as such. This is interesting, and if you listen to the story, there's a whole host of saying that that's where a lot of sailors had gone missing in the sea, and they were taken down. They went missing, and the stories have been squashed or whatnot. Wouldn't you think that a story, if you saw a woman in the sea that looked more like a woman, you might go over and try to rescue them? Guys, she had legs, and I'm willing to bet all money on that. She had legs. Another Ashley Ink story about the fisherman Jack, who off 10 miles off the coast of Thatcher Island, all right? And I'm going to be putting visuals in here that I've made myself because I'm tracking these like I'm a storm chaser, tracking a storm, all right? If you look at that story, Jack said that he was like, oh my God, Ashley, her eyes were wrong. They were too dark. I mean, me personally, I can tell the difference if I'm seeing pitch black eyes versus just like weird eyes. But the point is that we couldn't see her body. He only described here up. And that is actually in the same area. Massachusetts, what are you hiding? There's a lot going on in Massachusetts. I think that there's a lot of history on that land. But that was 10 miles off Thatcher Island. I'm going to put my picture in somewhere here near Stalwagger Bank. And this story took place in the same kind of Massachusetts, in the waters of the New England coast. And Source 90, his encounters, which I used to think were bullshit, but now I'm second thinking, his encounters were taking place around the Elizabeth Bay, or is it the Elizabeth Islands, Buzzard Bay area off the coast of New England, the docks around there. So don't even get me started when I start talking about the other places. She had legs. She had legs. This story was so awesome on so many fronts, all right? It sounds realistic, okay? It sounds realistic. If you check the video that I did just before, I'll put everything down in the description box below. You'll see the commonalities that I'm noting across the stories. There's so many stories. Massachusetts waters, what the frick are you hiding? The story that Ashley Inc. told about Jack, that took place at Stalwagger Bank, Thatcher Island, and I know that the story that Ashley Inc. also told about this guy who went onto this boat, this private boat, it was in the waters of the Massachusetts Bay, as well as Tiff's Ghost Talk podcast. That was also in Massachusetts Bay. That was also in the waters off of the New England coast. We can't get to the bottom of this. Okay, we're going to get to the bottom of this, but this is when this is what I mean when I say track the stories. It's not just bollocks. Track the pattern. I'm a late diagnosed neurodivergent. I literally found this out very recently, and this is where my pattern recognition kicks in hardcore. All right, it is above average. I don't say that to flex. I say that all the time, but I say that just so that you know that the person that you are talking to and where I'm coming from and why pattern recognition and why I talk about patterns so much. I literally have so much data that I put onto my USB sticks. I'm always in the background researching and just kind of like putting bits together. I just never used to talk about it that much before. But the water, so I'm going to start putting maps in and just kind of images that I make. And I also would like to add that when I'm listening to specific stories, I do feel like I get downloads. I get downloads in the bath as well. When I'm in the bath, I kind of scry, and I never really thought about it like that at first, but I actually do. And I get images in my mind about what specific beings look like when I'm hearing a story. I feel like I'm directed to sort of create them. And thank God with AI, because I used to do all of this before just by hand, by like multi-layer, by like Photoshop, and just kind of going and researching and getting all different parts of images and trying to put them together, which is really time consuming, but I did enjoy it at the same time. However, I use AI. I describe what it is to AI, generate images, and then I go in manually and start tweaking it all. So all the images that you'll see, if you see my name on them saying like property of mine, like please give credit, these aren't just generic internet images. These are ones that it's got downloaded, as far as I'm concerned, information in it. All right. And these hit differently. I'm being so serious that when I made one of them, I actively was like, I didn't want to look at it so much because I put sound on it and it came out so much better than I thought. And I found myself being sort of pulled in by the image, and I was like, oh. So these things, these energies aren't anything to play with, and people might not really believe this, okay, but like, I do. And I'm very careful as well, energetically, with what I put out there and with what I put around myself. So anything that I put out there to you guys is kind of like signed, sealed, delivered, and I consider it energetically safe. But I always ask you to do your own protection anyway and use your own discernment. Because just because I can manage something doesn't mean somebody else can't. This is why a whole lot of people get into trouble. Then they come on the internet and they start doing testimonials about how everything, the kit and the caboodle about the occult, the hidden, and all of this and metaphysical things is crap. And then they're turning their life over to Christ, no pun intended, when really what it is that they effed around and found out about things that they don't really understand, and they didn't use any spiritual hygiene or discernment or whatever. And I'm not shaming, but when you do that, then what do you expect? Do you know how many stories I've heard where people are going on about this, and then they start talking about, and then I use the Ouija board. Miss ma'am, sir, ma'am. Miss ma'am, sir. What? What? So no shade, but I'm just letting you know. So I may do a video where I just show images, or like I do a carousel of all of the images I've made and to what stories that they are for, but they will always be labeled in my videos. If an image is not labeled, it will be just generic Google things. Yes, but yes. So this video is by, like I said, Ashley Inc. And to me, it's very credible now. I will put the stuff in there. I swear, when I listened to this story, it bothered me for so long and I didn't realize why it bothered me. I didn't realize something was just bothering me. Then one day I got in the bath and it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. This being that they encountered had no legs. It didn't have any legs because, if the being had legs, when it got hauled onto the boat, why would he be asking, what is it? He may have been saying it in a shocked, rhetorical way. The other guy wouldn't be like, you know what it is. He would have said, this is Myron, it's a siren, he didn't. And what did he say? He said, this looked like a human. Not, it looked like a human with a tail, which made me know and realize that this being that they spoke about, the one that's doing all of this business in those waters, looked exactly like a human, which is even more compelling, even more tingly, spine tingly, and even more like, it gives to me, no pun intended, more legs. Because maybe this is why people are having these experiences and they don't even realize, because this being has legs. She had legs. She had legs, she had legs, she had legs.